The center of gravity in the east, the rising dragon, the world's factory, or Death Star master. They're all descriptions of China, one of the most populous countries in the world and with one of the fastest growing economies, but at the same time with serious ambitions in foreign and defense policy far beyond East Asia. No wonder China's neighbors seem to be in the shadows, especially for us in this part of Europe. But really a lot is happening there. Are we ready to rediscover Asia beyond China? Welcome to Warsaw Debate, a TVP World Series. I'm Grzegorz Nawrocki, and this is my co-host Małgorzata Bonikowska from the Center of International Relations.
In this program, we talk about global issues as seen from here, from Central and Eastern Europe.
In our Warsaw studio, we bring together experts, politicians, activists, scholars, and the audience from various backgrounds and organizations. Welcome.
Welcome. Welcome. Many thanks for joining us. In today's program, we are moving east. In fact, we have been moving east for decades now, but the destination has been mostly China.
China, obviously China. This is where our politicians and business people travel, hoping to sign lucrative contracts. But for some reason, they suffer from the Asian eclipse, not looking outside China. And the address book there is much, much fatter and to a large extent still overlooked.
Indeed, we have India, South Korea, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore. Long list.
Just a part of the list and a part of the world that we need to closer look at.
For the last few decades, when we in the West said Asia, we really meant China. And that was it. It was big enough, ambitious enough, and perhaps dangerous enough to capture our attention. It seemed like the whole world was captivated by China's unexpected and unprecedented rise. Europe was no exception. In a globalizing world, we placed our bets on the economic powerhouse, hoping for unlimited benefits. And that is how, step by step, a former Middle Kingdom became a world's factory, and much of the West happy customers, up to a point. Meanwhile, outside of the spotlight, other Asian nations have been on the rise too. Some of them totally transformed, from developing third world countries into new Asian tigers that entered the G20, a prestigious group of the world's strongest economies. But did we really notice that? India today, with its 5,000-year-old civilization and almost 1.5 billion people, is the world's largest democracy and its most populous country. It isn't called the world's factory, but with Bollywood glamour of nearly 2,000 films per year, its pop songs and dance, spiritual culture and vibrant business, it does have something for everyone. The ASEAN nations of Southeast Asia, such as Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines, Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, are growing rapidly and are eager for international partnerships. On their own, without the shadow of their big neighbor. Let's move to the east, Japan. With its robots and cars, it offers a blend of tradition and cutting-edge modernity. South Korea, with its Oscar-winning films, K-pop sensations like Gangnam Style and electronics, is now present all over the world, including Poland. Are our politicians really making use of the opportunity? Hardly. While Eastern Europe has dealt with Asia for centuries through the lens of colonialism, Eastern and Central Europe comes without that baggage. Is this an easier way to make partnerships with the rising Asian giants? When, a decade ago, China began flexing its muscles and projecting its power, the West started to change its attitude. Open arms were replaced by caution and then fierce competition. Washington declared Beijing its most dangerous rival. Europe's enthusiasm for doing business there started to wane. So, in 2024, when we look at Asia, what do we really see? Has China remained as a tempting partner, or are there opportunities for Europe to be found elsewhere?
Well, we'll obviously try to tackle these questions, answer these questions today. For many years here in Central and Eastern Europe, we were sort of blind when it comes to Asia. We looked at different parts of the map of the globe for obvious reasons, but that is significantly changing now. And where are we on that? What does the hard data tell us about it?
Indeed, it's always good to look at some data. We were looking west, so let's look at east at the moment. Let's take the top 20 largest world economies. Of course, you will find China here, number 2. But look at top 5. We have Japan here, number 4, and we have also India, number 5. What is important is that Chinese economy is slowing down at the level of 5% recently, while Indian economy is booming, is really growing. We have now 8%, and India has all the chances to beat Germany very soon, to become number 3, and maybe even number 2 world largest economy in the future. It's incredible. And then we have also South Korea here, Indonesia here, number 14, number 16. Very interesting economies. South Korea is a miracle. It's one of the Asian tigers in a very relatively short time. And Indonesia is very big. It's 270 million people. So it's really good to look at these economies. And let's move to people, by the way. Let's see now where are we as far as those who come to Europe. If we take statistics, top 10 non-EU countries whose citizens receive residence permit in Europe. If we forget for a little moment Ukraine and Belarus, because of the war, of course, we have this immigration. India is leading. As you can see, Indians come to Europe. Indians come to work, to study, so they are with us. And it's not only Indians. We have also Chinese, of course, including Hong Kong. And then we have also some other nations for different reasons, work also, but also political instabilities. Let's move on to the investment now, foreign direct investment. Not surprising, Europeans invest in Europe first, 60%. But what is interesting, we have United States, 21%, but if you count all these Asian nations, Indians, Japanese, Chinese, South Koreans, they invest too. And altogether, it's 10%, and the number of investment in Europe is growing. Finally, let's look at the intellectual power. We have universities. Of course, we have a lot of Asians studying. Here in this category, the West is leading. You know, we can be proud, 84. Mainly US and UK. Not so many Asian universities in top 100, but let's just be very open and frank. A lot of Asians work at the Western universities, and they contribute to these statistics.
Yeah, thank you very much for this insight, Małgorzata. Well, the academic excellence isn't really about, or at least not only about world rankings, it's also about investing in the future, is it not?
Right.
Today we'll try to open our eyes wider to the east. The motion tonight is the best fruits for Europe in Asia lie outside China. And we've invited 2 speakers in favor of this statement and 2 against it. So please welcome our main guests in the studio. And they are Jawahar Jyoti Singh, an Indian entrepreneur. Welcome. Social activist living in Poland and founder of Indo-Polish Chamber of Commerce. For the motion, welcome. Hello. Pick any of these 2 seats. Against the motion, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Bogdan Guralczyk, sinologist, University of Warsaw, expert on China, and also former ambassador of Poland to Thailand, the Philippines, Myanmar. Welcome to this program, Professor. For the motion, Susan Kim Chomicka, Korean, Canadian, international entrepreneur working in the USA, in Canada, now based in Poland. Welcome, very nice to see you. Last but not least, against the motion, Leszek Ślazyk, political scientist, publicist, professionally connected with China for 30 years. China24.com and running his own podcast. Very warm welcome to you. Please take a seat. We're also joined live from New Delhi, from India, by Professor Chintamani Mahapatra. Welcome to this program, Professor.
Thank you very much.
We're delighted that you could spare us some time, Professor. We'll listen to our debate and sum it up at the end of it. All right, the audience has just voted for the motion, and the results are following. 84% for the motion and 16% of the audience here in Warsaw against it. So let's start with opening statements from each of the speakers. We've got a couple of minutes for each speech, and the first one would be JJ Singh. There you go, couple of minutes.
Well, I'll start with this. There is, beyond China, also possibilities in Asia. I come from India, the country where we already heard is 1.5 billion people. GDP growth is right now almost 8%. The GDP is around $3 trillion. We are number 5th largest economy in the world and going to be very soon number 3. Now, we have the possibilities also because there are a lot of young people in the country who are actually contributing to the fintech, to the biotech, and to all the artificial intelligence and the other IT products, which, of course, EU and the other nations can make use of it. If we see the middle class in India, it's already on the rise. Today, we have almost 600 million people. And these are the people who are having the purchasing power. These are the people who are hungry for the new luxurious goods, automobiles, new stuff. So there is a market for the European products, and not only European products. Seeing from the Indian side, we are already having a robust partnership with EU, 120 billion euro for 2023. European Union is almost like 12% of the investment for the foreign direct investment in India. So we are already on the track. We are having some issues with the free trade agreement, which is again under discussion, and I'm sure that will be covered up. So what I see for EU, the best option is also not to put your all eggs in one basket, but to diversify. We have seen that during the COVID times, how much there was a trouble with the supply chains. Today, world has found India can produce. They are delivering. So guys, I'll just finish up by saying, yes, India is there. Thank you.
JJ Singh, thank you very much indeed. The arguments for the opposite side, Professor Bogdan Guralczyk, please. To a speaker's circle. They've got a speaker's corner in Britain, we've got a speaker's circle.
Means 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 arguments. Argument number 1, that we in Europe, including our audience in the previous decades, were living under 3 umbrellas. One was the American one, security umbrella, which is disputed right now and maybe will be disputed even more if Donald Trump will be chosen as an US president. This is an issue on the top of the agenda. Second umbrella in Europe, surprise, surprise, was a Russian umbrella. Fossil fuels, oil and gas. And this one is not existing anymore. And the third one, especially in the year 2000s, it was mentioned even during our presentation, China has become a global workshop, global factory. And we saw it, how dependent we are from Chinese medicaments or masks during the COVID pandemics. So, like it or not, we are dependent on China. And for a short time, we need to be engaged with China because we cannot cut it immediately. So China, like it or not, is our partner, not necessarily our enemy or definitely competitor. And point number 2, that we are living in the era of strategic competition. Strategic competition between 2 major global superpowers, United States of America and China. And Poland, for obvious reason, is not with China. We are in the Western American camp. But if that is so, it means that whatever happens in the US elections, US citizens are as divided as the Polish ones, but they have one strong bipartisanship, one strong point, that is China.
Professor
So China
Kowalczyk.
is our contender
Thank you
in
very
the
much.
long distance. In a nutshell, for a short time, we need
Thank
to
you
be
very much.
engaged with China. In the long term, we need to diversify and go to the other countries.
Professor
Thank
Kowalczyk,
you.
the rest of your argument then in our conversation later on in our discussion. Thank you very much for the motion. The other side then, Susan Kim-Chomicka. The floor is yours. The speaker circle is yours, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, there are 48 countries in Asia. We don't need, as European countries, to look just at China or even India to find the sweetest fruits in Asia. I'll give you the example of Poland. Did you know that the second largest foreign investor outside of Europe is Korea? Korea was the first serious investor in Poland from Asia, and they started in the 90s. But around 20 years ago, when I was with the Polish embassy in Seoul, we managed to attract the second wave of Korean investment, bringing in over $1 billion in investment, leading to Poland being one of the largest producers of television in Europe. And we not only brought manufacturing and assembly, we also brought high-tech investments, such as the Samsung R&D Center, which currently employs 1,500 people researching the latest technologies. Relationships with Asia take time. And over the past 20 years, that fruitful relations we've had has built trust, and the transparency of governance has culminated in 550 Korean-invested companies operating in Poland. We have become, in Poland, the largest producers of lithium-ion batteries in Europe and number 2 in the world. We have close cooperation in military and defense, future plans for nuclear development, nuclear energy development, and also possibly tank manufacturing here in Poland. I bring up the point, the example of Korea and Poland, not because I'm a Polish-Canadian citizen with Korean background, but used as an illustration of why all the potential benefits that we can have with one of those 47 countries.
Susan, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for this speech. And Leszek Ślazik against the motion, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if I'm against something. I'm from manufacturing sector, and I'm looking at the thesis of this meeting from this point of view. We call China global factory, but actually we don't understand what it means. What does it mean, global factory? Within the last 30 years, we moved from developed countries, our major manufacturing power, to China. Now, China, only China, has output bigger than the United States, Germany, Japan, Korea, and India altogether. China has bigger output, manufacturing output, than those 5 countries, whether we like it or not. It was our decision, and it was done within decades, not within just one day, 1 week, 1 month. It took 30 years for China to get the major role in many supply chains, global supply chains. For example, if we say about the batteries, okay, we can produce batteries even in Poland, but if we have no lithium from China, and especially if we have no graphite from China, we can do nothing. If you think about renewable energy, about renewable sources of energy, without China, it's impossible to do. Why? Because China, thanks to us, monopolized, for example, solar power or wind power. This is our job. So we can look for fruits outside of China in Asia, but if you want bread and meat, you have to search it in China, whether you like it or not. That's the reality. Thank you.
Let's start this discussion on this Chinese note. For many, many years, we were actually sort of blinded and fascinated by the opportunities that China brought us and gave us. But now we're becoming here, at least here in Europe or in transatlantic region, much more skeptical for obviously political reasons. But is it not too late? Can we afford to actually distance ourselves from China?
Well, we can try, but it won't be easy. China is definitely the major second superpower on the globe. And what is extremely important is emerging as a technological superpower, which means that China is surpassing us, as my predecessor was just saying, in high tech. In artificial intelligence, we have only two players on the globe. That is
but
US
you said,
and
Professor,
China.
we could try, but should we try? Should we give it a try?
Probably it will be necessary because we are living in different times. We were engaged with China for several decades. And since 2018, we have trade and customs war with China. And
it's going to grow.
Strategic competition.
Yeah.
So it is completely different era.
Yeah.
Because the Western world, starting from the US, realized how big is the Chinese challenge.
Have you changed your mind a little bit? Because from one of your interviews, I'm reading in one of your interviews, regardless of what Americans think, you have to align with China. This is the quote from...
Not recently, because I'm changing my mind definitely, due to the two factors. One was the pandemic, when we discover how deeply we are engaged with China and how deeply dependent from China we are. And secondly, of course, Russian aggression, full-fledged aggression.
That changed everything.
That changed a lot because we are on different side of the barricade. Even in China, I'm saying right now that there will be no business as usual in our bilateral relations until the war in Ukraine is not over.
Do you think that China is going to lose that dominance that we're observing at the moment?
Well, I think at some stage, yes, because we are already seeing that it is losing. But we have to remember one thing. The trade between EU and China is roughly around 740 billion euro. You cannot do it overnight.
That's a big thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I think Europe has to prepare gradually to, do a differentiation of cooperation. And what Professor said earlier also, with the war in Ukraine and the situation of the geopolitical, what China is they're doing right now in the Southeast Asia, I think that calls for whole Europe to rethink how they want to engage with China. I'm not saying...
Can India substitute China in any way?
Well, I don't think so it will be possible.
Or Asian countries?
Well, they can diversify, I'll put it this way. It is not the way that they should just eliminate the cooperation totally, because West, generally US and Europe, wanted China because that was a cheap market for them to produce.
You said it's actually almost our fault that we've made it grow in this direction.
Yeah,
yes, it is. And the fault which we make right now is like, for example, we can discuss that we will move some production or whole production to Vietnam or to India. Energy.
It was our mistake.
If you want to produce something, you need energy. If China by itself as a manufacturing output is bigger than USA, Germany, Japan, Korea, and India all together. So how you want to replace within 1 to 5 years?
So how long? Because the two gentlemen have just said that we should be actually at least trying to do this. What would be the time scale?
We were doing
10 years,
that
20
for
years?
40 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
How long will it take us
to make it back? We need at least 40 years. Why? Whatever we have, we are short of one very important thing. It's issue which I repeat again and again and again. People.
Okay.
I'm from Gdańsk. There were shipyards. There was whole universum of the whole infrastructure for shipping building, beginning from the schools, university, up to the shipyard. Now everything is finished, disappeared. There is no even single person in the proper age which you can take to start teaching technicians, teaching workers to build ships.
Right.
We are short of this, and this is the major problem.
And I'd like to ask Susan before we go on, because Susan hasn't spoken yet. So what is there in the Southeast Asia that we should really bet on, knowing that we should really change our strategy towards China?
Well, first of all, we have to have a good relation with China, but we need to be pragmatic about it as well, right?
And assertive.
Because the reality is that in new critical technologies, China is now has 75%, is a leader in 75% of those new critical technologies. And the rest are the US, 7 only, right? That's kind of scary. And what's worse is that they have a monopolistic hold on many of those. So one way or the other, we will be having to deal with them. But there is promise here and there. For example, in the question of AI, Singapore has one of the world's premier...
It's number 3. It's number 3 after the US.
One of the premier AI labs in the world. By the way, it was headed up by a Polish professor, Dr. Arthur Ecker, who's a friend of mine.
Academic exchanges, we've talked about it.
Yes, absolutely. They're also a leader, they also have a national policy for AI.
But, but you're talking about industries, I understand, but can the rest of the region somehow, pardon me for this word, substitute the potential of China, working together as Asian countries plus India plus other countries of the region? Do you believe that they can replace this Chinese potential that we have contributed to building?
I think it'll be difficult to replace, and largely because of the governing structure of China. When China decides they want to do something, they can flip at a switch, right? When they decided, when Xi Jinping decided, made in China 2025, here are the leading technologies, and China is going to be number 1, the whole country moved, right? Everybody was looking for ways to accomplish that. We're talking in the rest of Asia...
This is the working mode of dictatorships. It's much more, it's much quicker.
Unfortunately, that's the case.
Efficient.
And so the rest of Asia has all the individual countries with different policies and different structures.
Sure. Right? Professor Guralczyk, and then JJ, I remember
you will be surprised, our audience, if you look for the major power in Asia, it is still United States of America. We have think tank, Australian think tank, Lowy Institute, which is producing for more than a decade so-called Asia Power Index. And still, according to this index, if you take US as 100% as a number 1, China surpassed 90%. And for instance, India, South Korea, and Japan combined is smaller than China. So we have 2 major players on the Asian continent right now, which is US and China. And here everyone is starting immediately, South China Sea, Taiwan issue. No. To my mind, it is, first of all, high-tech and space, rare earth, artificial intelligence, new generation of computers, and so on and so forth.
JJ.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we cannot just finish the cooperation, but the question is also how we can jointly work to diversify. Coming back to the same point, you asked the question about whether the countries in Asia can cooperate. Yes, they can. But
and they are,
want to.
actually.
They are. But again, what Susan gave the example, that's also real. That in China, the way of working is different. Where in the democracies of the world, The business decides if they want to do the things or not. So they have an edge over it. But on the long run, and I can see already, earlier there was offshoring the things from Western countries. Now they're reshoring the things because they want to reopen. Look at, the chips. USA, EU wants to bring it home. Will it happen tomorrow? No, but you have to start somewhere. So it's a process. You ask a question, how much time it will take? My colleague said it will take 40 years.
I'd like to ask you how much time it will take to negotiate the free trade agreement between Europe and your country, India.
Well, this is on the side of EU because there are a lot of things what they were afraid. See, I mean, it's a question to laugh.
So it's our fault.
It's nobody's fault. The question is because India is not having the voice as to express. If India would have the seat at the United Nations, the things can be put in a different way. So that's the thing. We are on the track. There are the lack of...
Okay, what's the time span? How long is it going to take, in your judgment?
I think it's more than 15 years now already.
Okay. So how long are we going to wait
You're talking about which part? About the FTA?
About the free trade agreement.
It's almost 15 years, if I'm not wrong.
How long, in your judgment, are we going to wait for
I think it should be over in next 1 or 2 years max.
Now, we had your Prime Minister visiting Poland recently.
Yeah. It will not happen overnight. I know that things have changed. I know the geopolitical situation is different, But even with the visit also, it will not happen that it's going to be signed by tomorrow.
Right.
I hope by the year 2025, by the end of it, it should be
It was quite a remarkable visit because it was a visit after really dozens of years, 45 years.
45 years.
But what does it mean that he's coming here and talking to our Prime Minister?
Well, I think, it was a very good move for sure because of the 45 years and the relationship between India and Poland have been good, but at a certain level. With this kind of a visit, it will only go further.
Right.
And we are glad to hear that strategic partnership is already there. Sure. That's very important for the relationship.
In terms of general international political climate, do you think things are changing and some change is coming in our European relations with Asia, Southeast Asia, the proportions of these?
It's already changed.
Okay. It's already changed, and it will be, unfortunately, competition and strategic competition will be growing. Much depends from the US elections results. Secondly, what will go on the domestic scene in China.
So we are in a waiting mode, sort of.
But definitely, whatever happens in the US, they have bipartisanship. The common approach towards China, that China is our American major challenge, competition, even enemy. And this will not change.
Sure.
It will put us here in Europe in a very difficult position. For instance, Germany is deeply engaged in Chinese market.
Sure.
They cannot just lose it like Russia.
Europe has one foot in China, another foot across the Atlantic.
That's why I am arguing that for a short distance we need to diversify. Sure. For a long distance, definitely, it's difficult to predict what will happen.
Let me just ask, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, because in my opinion, what we are short of in Europe, it is a vision. We have no vision. Like, for example, China is following other East Asian countries, like, for example, South Korea.
They do have a vision. They do have a vision.
Yeah, of course. But in South Korea, General Park, at the end of 1960s, at the beginning of 1970s, he decided that South Korea will be the global champion in shipyards, in building of ships. And it happened.
Topic close to you.
Just ordered to leaders of big companies, you will do what state want you to do, not business is leading the country like United States, but the country, the state is leading the business. And the same is now in China. What we are short of, this is a vision, what we want to do as the thesis of this meeting. We are looking for fruits outside of China in Asia. We should think over and stop treating world as a jungle and Europe as a garden.
Right.
Yeah. As soon as
We had this conviction, perhaps not in this part of Europe, but the rest would probably, with the heritage of colonialism and all the
the
rest
world
of it,
is changing,
it would be understandable.
but the old Europe is not changing at all.
Okay. Okay, let's just open this discussion to the floor. Are there any questions?
Yes, we have questions
Małgosia,
on that side.
on your side.
Very good. Please just introduce yourself and just put the question.
Good morning. My name is Max, and I have a question for opposing side. Why shouldn't we move to our industries to India or South Korea or Southeast Asia? And for the opposite side, why should we move to India and South Korea?
Right.
Great question.
Well, who's going first?
Anybody who wants to take this question?
Why to go to India? Let him.
Well, I think I made myself very clear. It's a promising market. And definitely one thing, because the time ran out, I wanted to mention, in India you have 3D. Diversity, democracy, all right? These are the two most important Ds what we are having in India right now.
The largest democracy in the world.
It's the largest democracy in the world. And what EU in general stands for is the rule of law, democracy, and that's what we are best at. Plus, right now, with a production house picking up in India, I think it's a natural choice. When you look at the numbers also, with 1.5 billion people in the country to trade with, for the exports from EU to India and the other way for the production also, I don't see any other partner size matter. And the third D is demographics.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you have 3Ds.
And the opposing side.
Well, if you wish to escape from China now, you cannot. This is our problem. Our trade volume is 18 to 1. 18 on Chinese side, 1 on our side. So we are deeply engaged, and we can change this tide only slowly, step-by-step policy. I'm actually for diversification of our partners in Asia due to this growing strategic partnership.
But if I were to ask you about political mistakes, are we making any major political mistakes at this stage?
We neglected, first of all, and still are neglecting East Asia, that the global power shift has taken place.
But why is that?
It is not
Why is that?
Atlantic
The
world
data-
anymore.
Yeah.
It is Pacific world, Indo-Pacific world. And we are still dreaming that we are
Professor,
in the previous
let's
era.
take a step further. Why are we still dreaming? We do have data available. We do have people talking about it. Why are politicians still blinded?
This is for our politicians to ask, because I'm voting very strongly. Time to engage, time to make a strategy for East Asia, for Asia as a whole.
And what kind of answers do you hear?
No answers. They are not interested because we have a war in Ukraine. So we have only Moscow, Kiev, London, Washington, Brussels.
If I can,
I would
if I
not
can,
No
agree,
New
if I
Delhi,
may.
no
I
Beijing,
jumped in
no
because
Jakarta.
that's exactly why we are doing this program. I think we just spotted Europeans really reflect on that very deeply. And we are very aware of all this complexity of the world. The only thing is, seeing the scene from Central Eastern Europe, we have slightly different perspective. We don't have any colonial past. We have all
Which is
the
an advantage.
future in front of us. And in this regard, we are very close to our Asian friends.
Right.
And we would like more cooperation. Definitely are at that stage. But I agree, diversification is really
Is key.
the key. Let us take some questions.
Yeah,
we
but
have
we've got a
still.
question on this side of the audience. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Olivia, I have a question for Professor, because I wanted to ask, to answer the question, actually we should ask another question and look at the perspective, Chinese perspective on Europe. So what role does Europe play in China policy?
Thank you very much. Does it?
Very important role, because China would like to have our relationship, transatlantic relationship, to be separated. US as a different partner, Europe as a different partner. And we in Europe, we are deeply divided what to do. The French president is for strategic autonomy, so-called. The Germans are so deeply engaged, their car factories and the others in China. So we have no common policy. We have no common European policy towards China, towards India, towards so-called emerging markets, which is our big problem and big fault.
No vision.
In a way, it reflects the situation in South and Southeast Asia also, that we are not one country. We are 27 member states in the EU, and that reflects, and in the West, or global West, how we call it, it's over 50 countries, so it's quite difficult to find a common ground. Let's
All right,
move.
another question from your side. Yes, Małgorzata.
What strictly economic benefits would Europe have from cooperation with the Asian countries that are not China?
Other not economic profits,
Yes.
something else.
Yes.
Right.
Instead of talking all the time about economy, what else do you offer?
Values, democracy, and so on and so on.
Well,
All right.
like I said already, the biggest value is democracy, culture, heritage, spirituality, I mean, I can name few if you're talking about besides business. So I think India, with this diversification and the land so big.
Can I help them? Technology.
Yes,
no,
please.
the question was besides business, clearly.
Besides business. All right.
Technology is invention, innovative mindset.
What
This
about
is another
Bollywood films?
story.
Intellectual stuff. Okay.
Korean pop?
Intellectual stuff.
Absolutely.
Music.
Okay.
What about the largest, not only democracy, but the culture? India is as
That's
old
what I said.
as
The
China.
culture in the beginning, that brings everything under
But it's
one
not
roof.
only India. All these countries have history. Let's not forget about it. Let's have one final comment on that side.
Or a question from,
Question or comment?
Yes, thank you much. I think what
Can
we
you
have
please
to think about...
Can you please introduce yourself?
Thomas Lukaszuk, the University of Warsaw. I think that the French shoring we have to think about, and in terms not only of economy but also of politics, as it was stressed. And I'm on your side with diversification, but what you are talking a bit futuristic. I mean, you are talking about next, let's say, 50, 60 years to at least 40. So
that's a long time.
What is this long term? So what suggestions do you have in the short and mid-term for us? Thank you.
For a short term, we need to have strategy and common position towards Asia, because Asia is emerging, Asia is growing, and we cannot stop it. We need to adjust ourselves to the new circumstances. We have so-called power
But we can't
shift.
agree about it.
We do not agree with inside of Poland, inside of our region, inside of Visegrad Group, which is in the refrigerator, and of course within the European Union as well. So we have a problem and a headache. Secondly, we need to wait for the result of the US elections, because one side, Democratic side, will keep engagement with Europe. Donald Trump is not promising engagement with Europe. He is promising peaceful solution for Ukraine. This is a tremendous challenge for us here in Poland, because he could go away to South China Sea, to Taiwan, to Indo-Pacific.
Sure. Can I just ask one more question, maybe developing on that thought that was just uttered before? To what extent would the growth of Southeast Asia make a world a better place?
Well, for sure, with the growing geopolitical change that's happening and the influences that China is trying to engage in, obviously they are exerting their influence all over Southeast Asia. And by having strong relationships with the Southeastern Asian countries and Eastern countries, that strengthens their position to resist China. So it's important for geopolitical stability and also to somewhat slow down their progress. I mean, look what they're doing in Africa. China is, all over Africa, aligning all the African countries to their side. Right now, it is a race for influence in the world.
All right. Well, in this discussion, we're sort of looking in one direction from here towards the East Asia, but it's worth to at least remember, at least note that they're also looking at us with perhaps similar questions. The worlds that's coming will be multi-civilizational, multipolar and multilateral, something that we must prepare for. But are we really ready? Here's Kishore Mahbubani, called Mr. Asia, by the way, a diplomat from Singapore, a former permanent representative to the United Nations.
The best multi-civilizational laboratory in the world is ASEAN, Southeast Asia. All the major civilizations you can find in Southeast Asia. You can't find them in Europe. Europe only has one civilization. So you got to enter. Europe has now got to change its mind and enter a multi-civilizational world. And you know what? The best place to learn to handle different civilizations is Southeast Asia. So this is quite amazing how ignorant Europe is in general about this region.
All right. So the question is, are we so ignorant?
Yes, we are. I'm dealing with China for, harsh to say, half a century, and I know what has changed. And I know also some other countries. I was posted as ambassador to Southeast Asian countries. We do not realize how Asia has changed, and that the center of gravity of this planet is moving towards Asia, Indo-Pacific Asia, definitely so.
Right.
We saw it, by the way, by the data provided by Małgorzata in introduction. India is coming, China is already number 2 in all dimensions, and we have geopolitical competition between two major superpowers, not for trade, economy or business, for high tech.
But if I may, just one question to you, because the thesis of Kishore is very clear. Europe is, it's arrogant. It's not only that we lack knowledge, we also have a very wrong approach. We don't want to learn. To Susan and to Jay, do you see that we, the Western people, Europeans.
You cannot say that right now.
Just let's be frank. Are we not only ignorant, but we are arrogant as well?
No, I wouldn't say ignorant. I mean, Europe has to open up for sure.
Good.
You know, we can see right now what's happening in Europe. I mean, demographics are coming down. Europe needs to open up because otherwise there'll be no hands to work in Europe. Now, how do we do that? You know, you have to open, first of all, to get the people in, assimilate them, and there has to be a proper program for that. And Europe is not prepared because they're not thinking in those terms at all. For them, still, anybody who is coming from Asia is, a person who is just coming to earn the money here. They're not bringing in anything good. They don't see the investments coming in. They don't see how the jobs are made.
JJ, where do you see the source of optimism?
Do I see this?
Yeah.
Nowhere. No, but Susan, maybe it's important.
I think it should come. I mean, they are not seeing this. Europe is not seeing
So you're waiting for the Enlightenment.
But it's important, maybe, Susan, because you are a Korean-Canadian, so you know Canada quite well, and you also work in European Union for many years.
Yeah.
Do you feel this feeling of superiority from the Western side towards Asians?
That's a tough question. Question.
I mean, personally speaking, from a personal standpoint, actually, it's been the opposite. I've had nothing but positive reactions from both living here in Poland and in Canada and US. If I can say, East Asians are kind of considered the model minority, right? And so, we're considered smart and educated and add value. So I've actually had the opposite experience, but, it's different for different...
it's very subjective.
Different countries.
Yes. And Professor Gore.
For our audience, before we start to summarize, one very strong point. Both China and India are the most populous countries on the globe. Both 1.4 billion inhabitants. European Union as a whole is just 450 million inhabitants. And
With
both
difficult
of them,
demographics.
India and China, or rather China and India, are in the time of renaissance, rejuvenation, and emergence. Time to wake up our audience, time to start to think about this word different way.
Can I add something?
But just one sentence, very short sentence, please.
We don't understand in Europe why China is so attractive for global south. That's one reason. China has shown to the whole world, to the poor world, how to take out 800 million people out of poverty within 30 years.
Okay.
That's all.
For many years, the West, Europe, and particularly Central and Eastern Europe, took little notice of what was happening in Asia outside China, too far away and irrelevant. We felt that the power button set on a transatlantic desk. It seems now that Asia is less and less interested in our buttons and eager to create their own. And it's growing. How is it going to develop? Closing observations after this discussion, after this debate, will be from Małgorzata Bonikowska and her guests.
Thank you. Chintamani, are you with us?
Yes, of course.
So you followed our discussion. Here we are in Warsaw, you are in Delhi. What's your take?
Well, it was a very good debate. But the main question was whether Europe should look at Asia in addition to China, not other than China. It is not a question of either or, either China or the rest. It has to be China plus the rest. And too much of importance, too much of concentration is not good. So when people talked about diversification, I think that is the right way to go about it. But why did at all this question come that should we look at Asia other than China? Recall, it's all because of the pandemic.
But this is very interesting. I want to jump in because my observation following your debate is that actually the position has changed. You know, some of those who were against the motion or for the motions, then they were also having different positions during the discussion. So this shows how complicated is this argument. And also, you know, for you being Asian, if you can just add to this your perspective on Europe as well. How do you see us?
I'll do that. But every country in the world, including India, was trying to make profit out of doing business with China. Even now, despite our differences, China is a very important trade partner of India. But since the Wuhan virus issue, suddenly the world woke up that too much of dependence on one country and too many supply chains moving through one country, one hub, would be really fatal for the economies as well as lives of other people. That is why the question came, is it really good to put all the eggs in one basket in Asia, or we need to diversify much more than what it has been done so far? I think this is the right way to go about it. And in India is not only the fifth largest economy in the world, let us emphasize that Indian economy is much larger than French economy, Italian economy, British economy.
But we don't want to be dependent on India neither, if you suggest to us.
Correct. No. I'm suggesting.
So let's maybe not, compete. Let's maybe look at Asia altogether.
What I'm suggesting is concentration or putting all the eggs in one basket is no good for any country.
Right. So
it's not.
So while we take this lesson from you, I think it's important, and I think the EU and Europe altogether is looking at Asia as a very good large forest with a lot of fruits, right? So the balance, that's one take. The diversification is second one. But how now you, as Asians, look at Europe? Because there is more and more cooperation between the Asian countries, as you rightly said, China and India even, despite the fact you have border issues, despite the fact that you are rivals in many areas, you cooperate. Maybe you will not need Europe in years to come.
Let me give you an example. Europe was increasingly becoming dependent on the Russian gas, Russian energy. Until the Ukraine war, nobody talked about offshoring the energy connectivity with Russia. So this is the time to think about China as well. So don't forget, the pandemic of another kind may hunt the world yet again. So too much of concentration on one country is no good for any country in the world. This is where I am faulting Europe. That realize the amount of dependence many European countries had on Russia, including Germany.
But you didn't answer my question. Again, do you think in the future, in the 21st century, Asian century, as Mr. Asia says, Europe will be irrelevant for Asians?
Not at all. Europe is never going to be irrelevant. Europe is having a matured economy. You are not going to gallop in terms of growth the way China did, the way India is doing now, or other countries might do. You are a matured economy. You are also a fantastic civilization. Your place will always be there in the world. But what is important is to wake up to the realities of changes taking place in the Indo-Pacific and in other parts of the world, and accordingly adopt a policy where no country should be powerful enough to punish others at difficult times.
Thank you very much.
There is some hope for Europe.
There is some hope. Thanks you. See you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mahapatra. Thank you, Małgorzata, for this. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to take another vote. Right, so we've got the results now already. It's changed a bit, 77% for the motion and 23% against the motion. That's the final result after this debate. Ladies and gentlemen, the Asian chapter of our European history will certainly intensify. It's up to us how we will handle this relationship. But first, we need to learn and understand Asia in all its complexity, I might say.
Learn and understand, and definitely Asia is more and more important for us Europeans. That's all for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. This is Warsaw Debate on TVP World in cooperation with the Center for International Relations.
For more content from the region, follow us on tvpworld.com and on our social media. See you next time. Goodbye.